What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing the first episode of a brand new Squadrons series where I'm going to be going in depth on some loadouts you can use in Star Wars Squadrons, whether they be really good for getting kills, great support roles, or even occasionally some funny, not so good loadouts just for a bit of a laugh. And today we are going to be starting off with what I like to call my hit and run Interceptor loadout. I'm sure you all know by now, seeing as the game has been out for a few months, that an A-Wing or a TIE Interceptor can be extremely useful in the right hands or with the right loadout. Not only can they be super hard to kill for the opposition, but they also deal a ton of damage themselves, and if you play them right, they can be exactly what your team needs to keep up that morale and come home with an easy victory. Now, in this series, I'm going to go in depth on each component that I use for these loadouts, explaining why I use those components over others, or even some alternatives that you can try if you don't like the ones that I recommended. And then once I've explained the whole loadout itself, I'll then get into some gameplay explaining how I recommend using that loadout so that you can play it exactly as it's intended. So, like I said, today's episode is going to be covering the hit and run Interceptor, which, as you can tell by the name, is perfect for getting into the action, dealing some damage, and then quickly escaping back to safety so that you're reducing the amount of deaths that you have per game. As an Interceptor, you're not really going to survive all that long if you're just up in the middle of the action for a long period of time. Obviously, if you're a really good player or you've got a great support teammate, then that might not be the case, but for most of us, Interceptors generally don't last very long if they hang around the action. Because of that, I've tailored this loadout to be perfect for just getting in and causing a bit of a ruckus, and then safely escaping back to heal up before doing it all over again. So without wasting any more time, let's get into the actual loadout. So starting off with their primary weapon, I actually just use the standard laser cannon, as I feel like it's the most well-rounded, as those basic components generally are. The rapid fire cannon is another alternative if you do prefer to use that one, but the range is only 600 meters and it does overheat really quickly. So for me, since my aim is simply not very good in Squadrons, I prefer to use the standard cannons instead. The range on these standard cannons is 1000 meters, so this not only allows you to start shooting at your enemies earlier on, but it also doesn't overheat as quickly as those rapid fire cannons, meaning you can deal damage for about twice as long, with the actual damage output being only 120 damage less per second. Moving on to the left auxiliary, a lot of people tend to use the repair kit for this one, but for me, I actually prefer using the targeting jammer instead. The targeting jammer takes you off the radar for 5 seconds, so you're unable to be targeted by enemies. AI and the capital ships and stuff won't shoot you nearly as much, and you also won't show up on the actual radar for the enemies, as in the radar in their cockpit and the actual tactical map as well, so you can imagine how useful this thing is. It works really well if you're attacking as well as when you need to get away at low health, so it's pretty much useful in every situation, but I will touch on it a little bit more once we get to the end of the video. Moving on to the right auxiliary, for this one I use the barrage rockets, and if you can learn how to use these to your advantage, then you're going to be dealing a whole lot of damage to the enemy team. Now, unlike most missiles in this game, these are not lock-on rockets, these are just dumbfire rockets, meaning they'll go in the direction that you shoot them, and there's no waiting for a lock-on or anything like that. Now, they only deal 100 damage per rocket, which is not much at all compared to your actual lasers, which deal 545 damage per second, or DPS. So it doesn't sound like much, but you can fire 4 rockets per second, and so pretty much you're taking the 545 DPS from the lasers and adding 400 DPS from the rockets, meaning you can deal almost 1000 damage per second if you're firing both your rockets and your lasers at the same time. I should also mention before I forget that you can hold the button to rapid fire these rather than just tapping it, which I didn't figure out for much longer than I would like to admit. You spawn with 40 rockets as well, so it's not all that often that you'll sort of run out of ammo within a dogfight or a strafing run on the capital ship, and when you do run out of ammo, you can just go all the way back to your flagship or the capital ships and resupply, which is part of the strategy with this loadout anyway. Moving on to the countermeasures, and I personally use the sensor inverter, which is the one that turns the enemy missile back on the enemy, but you can just as easily use the seeker warheads if you prefer those ones as well, as those are definitely a little bit safer. For me, I love the satisfaction of turning an enemy's missile back and killing them with their own missile while I'm escaping to safety or something, and so for me, I almost always run the sensor inverters for that reason. Next up we have the hull, and I actually just use the basic hull for this loadout. I feel that the interceptors are already quick enough so I don't need any more speed or anything, and because of that targeting jammer and just the way that I play this loadout, I don't feel that I need any extra health either. For the shield, I use the nimble deflector shield, which does reduce the max shields in return for a much faster shield regen time, and in the description it literally says great for hit and run tactics, and so that's all I needed to hear to make the decision on this one. It is perfectly built for how I use this starfighter. Lastly, we then have the propulsion engine, and this one takes away 10% of the maneuverability while gaining 100% acceleration. This means that you can essentially stop on a dime and speed up really quickly, and since the interceptors are already super maneuverable anyway, that 10% doesn't really matter much in my opinion. Now there is also the thrust engine, which again has great for hit and run tactics in its description. However, it does come at the cost of 30% acceleration and 30% maneuverability, which for me just isn't worth it, as I still do like to have that maneuverability for when I'm chasing someone in a dogfight, or when I need to duck and weave behind cover if I am falling back to safety. So that is going to do it for the loadout for the A-Wing. As for the TIE Interceptor, everything is exactly the same. However, the rockets are actually called the Onslaught rockets instead, and obviously there are no shields, but everything here is exactly the same other than the name of those dumbfire rockets. So now getting into how I actually use it, the idea is pretty simple. You want to get into the action, maybe get a kill or two and deal some damage to a capital ship or a raider, and then once you're starting to run out of ammo for your rockets or someone has you in their line of sight, you want to essentially just fall all the way back to safety, repair and resupply at your supply ships or the flagship, and then literally just rinse and repeat that for the whole game. The main goal of the Interceptor in fleet battles is to try and both control the morale by getting lots of kills and saving your teammates from being killed by taking out their tails, and also just to be a menace to the other team. Even if you're not actually dealing all that much damage or getting a ton of kills, you can still be a presence out there in the skies to where your enemies know you're going to kill them if they get too aggressive, and that might cause them to change up their game plan. Pretty much what I'm saying is that a good Interceptor can really control the ebb and the flow of the match by making the morale stay in their favour and putting the game on your terms in order to allow the rest of your team to do their jobs a whole lot easier. With this hit and run tactic, you're going to get a lot of kills and a lot of capital ship damage, while also lowering your own deaths per game due to that ability to cloak and run back to safety. And so obviously the more kills you get and the less deaths that you get just means the better your team's morale is going to be, and we all know that if you can control the morale meter, then you're very likely to win the game, since you can pretty much lock the other team into defending, and no matter how good you are, no one can defend forever. You'll see a few examples throughout this gameplay where I'm heading in on offense, maybe getting a kill or just dealing some capital ship damage, and then as soon as I'm getting shot at or as soon as I'm out of rockets, I'm just out of there instantly, avoiding the death and resupplying before going back in and doing the same thing. Now another great tactic that you can use is essentially just to be a distraction for your teammates. You can fly in, get noticed by your enemies, and then try and get them to chase you, and as soon as you're in trouble you can just cloak, becoming hidden, meaning that they won't really know where you are. And all the while your teammates in their bombers are flying in to take out the shields on the flagship, since you've probably distracted 2 to 3 enemies on your own. Now this class also works very well on defense too, as every time you see a bomber flying in on the flagship, generally they're going to be flying in a straight line, and like I said earlier, those rockets combined with your lasers are just going to light these bombers up, and you can see a few examples on screen of a few times in the creator clash where we flipped the morale within roughly 1 minute because we were just able to dominate those bombers on defense. Overall, this is probably my favourite loadout so far for the Interceptor. I've still got plenty of messing around to do for some new loadouts, so I'm sure I'll find plenty of other awesome variants too. But if you do want to improve your skills in an Interceptor, then I'd definitely recommend giving this loadout a crack. That is going to do it for this one though, guys. With this being the first episode, if you have any critiques or suggestions for how I should do future episodes, then let me know down below, as I'm always keen to improve on these types of videos. On top of that, if you have any of your own loadouts that you would like me to cover, then feel free to leave them down in the comments. Like I said, I've got a lot of things to test out, and if you guys have anything that you want me to try, then definitely let me know down below, and if I do end up using it, I'll make sure to give you guys a shout out in the video. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.